You haven't seen me film a video sitting down on my couch in front of an actual real camera for a while now. I think almost 2 years, if not exactly 2 years. And the reason for that is I'm stupid. I have had this camera the entire time I lived in Pennsylvania. It's actually my partner's camera, and she kindly lets me use it to film videos with since it looks really nice. But I had lost it. I couldn't find it, and I finally just found it again. So, hooray, real videos again! Right now, for anyone who hasn't watched my recent videos, I'm actually in the process of packing my entire life because my partner and I are at hopefully the tail end of buying a house. We're at those last really anxiety-inducing steps, so wish us luck on it. And if all goes well, then we're gonna get our closing date. And since all of that is exciting but also extremely stressful, today I wanted to do kind of an easy video and one that's a little more laid back. Although I'm sure it's gonna be a point of contention for some people. It's the age-old question that has gone on since at least the early 2000s of why do Goths and Emos hate each other so much? Because, let's face it, no matter what we try to tell ourselves and each other, there's definitely some beef between the Goths and the Emos, all the way to the extent that even South Park has poked fun at it. But why is that? Why do we get so offended when we're mistaken for each other? Why do we get so annoyed when people think that we're one thing when we are something else? Now, obviously, I can't speak for everyone in the goth community, and I'm not an emo, so I most certainly can't speak for the emo community, but my sister is an emo, as is my best friend, and we all get along just fine. And I've spent enough time around them to kind of get their opinion on this stuff. And I've come up with a few reasons I think might contribute to why there tends to be issues between our communities. To get the first elephant out of the room, emo, whether you like it or not, is kind of a branch of the gothic subculture. There was punk, which is the granddaddy, and then goth, and then all these subcultures underneath the goth umbrella. And basically, for the most part, when any normie sees you walking down the road and you're wearing dark colors and you have weird colored hair and dark makeup, they're pretty much always going to peg you as being a goth, whether you identify as one or not. It's just what tends to happen. And I think that comes a lot from the media and the fact that when you see a character, usually a female character in movies and TV shows, who has dark makeup, dark hair, dark clothing, they're usually, listed as being some kind of goth person. Now, a lot of this goth versus emo stuff that I noticed anyway, really started when I was in high school in the early 2000s. That's when kind of that MySpace style of emo with I call it the foxy hair, kind of started. And it looked adorable. I thought it was cute from the start. It wasn't for me necessarily, but I didn't see any problem with it. And a lot of my close friends were emos. And the first thing that I noticed being a goth in school is that they didn't listen to the same music that I did. They weren't really super interested in it, and I tried their music, and it was not really something I was interested in either. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's why they're subcultures of each other and not the same thing. Now, that is the first reason that goths and emos can get a little bit annoyed when you mistake them for one another, because we don't like the same thing. Goth and emo are predominantly music subcultures with some aesthetics attached as well. And when you call someone an emo who is a goth, they're going to get annoyed with you because they're going to go, I hate that music. That's not the music I enjoy listening to. Please don't, because I don't want people sending me all this emo music. And vice versa, if it's someone who loves things like My Chemical Romance and Avenged Sevenfold, they're going to be a little confused if you assume that they're a goth and you send them a bunch of stuff by Bauhaus. They're going to be like, what the hell is this? So that's kind of one of the more common and simplified reasons. Another very simple reason that people get annoyed by it is just who wants to be misidentified. No matter what area of your life you're identifying yourself as, for example, your religion, your personality type, your music likes and dislikes, your fashion likes and dislikes. It's annoying if you're working really hard to present yourself in a certain way and someone mistakes you for something else. It can kind of make you second guess whether or not you're getting it right. And that can be really frustrating. So that's kind of one of the more simple reasons people can get annoyed. They just don't want you thinking there's something that they're not, and you can't really blame anybody for that. You wouldn't like it if someone pegged you for something else either. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar to when someone has a legitimate concern at like a restaurant or a store or something, and they just want to talk to the manager to get some clarification, and they're automatically labeled a Karen. Someone asking for the manager isn't always a Karen. Likewise, someone who dresses in a dark fashion sense and listens to moody music isn't necessarily a goth or isn't necessarily an emo. And the last big reason that it tends to cause a lot of upset and annoyance is unfortunately an issue that involves a lot of infighting as well as external problems from outside the goth and emo subcultures. And that is unfortunately that people think of each other in stereotypes. So a lot of goths notice the stereotypes of emos, that they like that kind of cutesy side of spooky stuff. They're very creepy cute. They like things like skull animals and stuff that are on the more cutesy side that not every goth will be interested in. And they still like things like giving hugs and the "rawr is I love you" and dinosaur thing. It's very juvenile, not in a bad way, like kiddish, childish, childlike, which it's adorable. Like I said, I have absolutely no problem with it. I think it's really cute. It's not really something that I would do myself, but I think it's adorable and it's harmless. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop with goths just not wanting to be mistaken as someone who likes cute things. It also extends to the negative stereotype of, before we get too far into this, if self-harm and stuff like that triggers you, please leave, because there isn't really a way to discuss this without discussing that. That's your warning. There's a lot of stereotype around people who are emo, that they sit in their bedrooms in the dark listening to Evanescence and a lot of goths growing up before emo was really a thing were bullied, were ridiculed, were mocked, and people assumed that that was them for a while. They assumed that because you wore dark things and you listened to this moody, poetic music that most people would find depressing, it must mean that you're depressed. And a lot of people were forced into therapy by their parents because they assumed they were unhappy. A lot of people were bullied by friends and family alike and by their classmates, and went through a lot just because they liked a certain aesthetic and they liked a certain style of music, which is always completely inexcusable in my opinion. You never should bully, harass, or cause harm to someone just because they're a little bit different from you. I mean, if we were all the same, this world would be exceedingly boring, right, Pooh Bear? Pooh Bear agrees. And unfortunately, when someone assumes a goth is an emo, we're kind of thrown back to that really ugly side of our lives where people assumed that we were doing things like self-harming, where people assume that we're depressed. And unfortunately, they don't exist in a vacuum. It's not everyone, but most of my friends who were emo were actually doing that. They were very much an active part of that stereotype. They were sitting in their room in the dark. They were listening to moody music on MySpace, and they were self-harming. And the colorful side of that aesthetic and the cutesy stuff, like Emily the Strange and stuff, was the happy side of it that would pull them out of those really dark spaces, which is kind of a beautiful thing when you really get down to it, that they had this beauty in the sadness, this shining light at the end of their tunnel that they could always rely upon. And unfortunately, in my opinion, since we had all been through that already in our own lifetimes, When we noticed people assume we were emo and that they thought that was a bad thing because they assumed that we were self-harming, instead of getting upset and offended and being like, crap, they're sending me right back to that really dark place. I don't want to be there, so screw the emos. I want nothing to do with them. Stupid emos, get out of my life. We should have been compassionate. We should have been kind and open them as their big brothers and big sisters and big non-binary siblings and said, listen, kid, people assumed I was like that. Some of us were, but a lot of us weren't. A lot of us are legitimately happy looking the way we do and listening to the music that we do. But if you are feeling that, let me be here to help you. Let me help you find the beauty in the strange to help you get through this difficult time in your life. And instead, we participated in infighting. We were just as big of bullies to these kids as the normies were, and that's something I think a lot of us need to fess up to. There were a couple of us in my school that were just like, protect the little emo kid, we want to make sure they're okay. But that was not the majority, unfortunately. And I see the same thing happening now. I would argue that pastel goth is kind of an extension of emo. It's more like modern emo because the emos had like the neon pinks and the neon greens and bright purples with their black, and pastel goth has the more pastel muted colors, the same like blue and pink and purple with their black, and listens to slightly different music than goths do. And I see the same thing happening all over again right now. As soon as a pastel goth girl shows up on Twitch or something and someone calls her pastel goth, a bunch of people show up and are like, she is not a real goth. Goths don't look like that. While also still preaching that it is a music-based subculture. We need to cut it out. We really do. But I'm getting off on a completely different tangent right now. That all being said, I hope that answers some questions. If you have your own observations on why goths get offended when you call them emo and emos are offended when you call them goth, feel free to mention them in the comments. I personally think it's stupid. I don't know why people get so bothered by it. Like, I just go like, nope, I'm a this, I'm a that, that's not how I identify. And if they ask, I just say I don't listen to the music. End of story. Like, you can finish the conversation right there. And nobody's feelings are hurt and no one's thrown under the bus. But I hope you enjoyed this little video. I just need to do something kind of easy, and as we progress further into the house stuff, I will keep you guys updated so you know what's going on if I have more big gaps between videos. And once again, I will be trying to do a disabled goth kind of homemaking series because that house has a lot of work that needs to be done on it to make it my own. But until next time, do something that makes you happy today as long as you're not hurting anyone else. And I'll see all of you again soon. Pooh Bear says, bye-bye.